Return the 60,000, or you are no son of mine. My father shouted it with a shaking finger an inch from my face. My older sister Camille stood behind him, arms crossed. You drained Mom's care fund. We all know it was you. I said nothing. I just set a plain folder on the table. The veins stood out on my father's neck. He looked like grief and scotch were about to stop his heart right there in the living room. Behind him, Camille wore the same disgusted expression she'd aimed at me since we were kids. You were the only one with the code to her study, Wes. Just admit it and get out. I stood in the middle of the room, holding that folder. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. On the mantle was a photo of my mother, who died 4 months ago after 2 years of illness. The $60,000 was the legacy she'd set aside for whichever of us first gave her a grandchild. Camille was 7 months pregnant. I was single and worked nights. In their minds, the arithmetic was obvious. The jealous brother had cracked the safe to fund a life he couldn't afford. The neighbors saw your truck here the night it vanished, my father barked, stepping closer, breath sour with the cheap whiskey he'd been living on. I raised you. I trusted you. And you robbed your dead mother? I didn't take it, Dad, I said quietly. Thieves always say that, Camille spat. Mom would be ashamed. Give it back or I'm calling the police. I mean it, Wes. My phone's in my hand. I looked at Camille. She was wearing a new camel coat she'd told everyone was a gift from her husband's bonus. I looked at my father, broken, but underneath it, almost relieved to finally have a target for his grief. You want the truth? I asked. I want the money, he roared. I didn't answer. I opened the folder and laid the contents out one at a time, slow, like a dealer turning over a winning hand. 3 high-resolution stills from the private banking suite at our mother's bank. The first showed a woman at a teller window in a heavy scarf and dark glasses, but the ring on her hand, a one-of-a-kind sapphire our mother wore every day, caught the light. The second showed that same woman lowering the scarf to verify her face for the camera. It was Camille. The third was a copy of the withdrawal slip, not signed by me, but signed with our mother's forged signature, dated 3 days before she died, while she lay heavily sedated and barely conscious. I watched the color drain out of Camille's face until she was the gray of wet paper. My father bent over the photos, picked up the one of her face, and his hand began shaking for an entirely new reason. Camille, he whispered. She didn't just take the 60,000, I said, my voice level. She told the bank she was acting under Mom's power of attorney while I was at the pharmacy getting Mom's last dose of morphine. I turned to my sister, who was hyperventilating now. Nice coat, by the way. Did you buy it before or after you sat at her bedside and watched her stop breathing? I was drowning in debt, Camille stammered. The baby, we needed a bigger place. You let him disown me, I said. You sat in this room for 3 weeks and watched him scream at me, call me a thief, ban me from the house, with her money already sitting in your account. My father turned to her, horror spreading across his face. You swore you saw him at the safe. You swore. Camille crumpled into the armchair, sobbing. I was going to put it back. I picked up my keys. The weight I'd carried for a month lifted clean off and settled onto the 2 of them. I already gave everything to the bank's fraud unit, I said, walking to the door. Stealing from a deceased person's estate is a felony, Dad. They opened the case Monday. Son, wait, I didn't know. Let's talk, he called, his voice suddenly small and old. I paused in the doorway and looked back at the man who'd spent the last hour calling me a disgrace. You told me not to come back without the money. I nodded at the photos. There it is. It's in Camille's account. But like you said, I'm not coming back. I shut the door and didn't flinch at the shouting that started behind it. Some fires are meant to burn. I'm just glad I finally put down the matches.